I think my story is kind of pretty common here in America. I started out at the Rochester Institute of Technology under Katsunori Matsushita sensei. Basically, I made a friend during orientation, and we decided to try out Kendo together. He still does Kendo too, by the way. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I don't really know what I got myself into when I first joined. I wasn't really sure of what it was so much, but I knew it was really cool looking. So I went ahead and tried it and just fell in love with it. And in hindsight, I think the reason why I kind of stuck with it was due to the group of people that was in the club at the time. So Kendo in America is largely kind of a minority-led activity. And so you get to meet a lot of different people from different backgrounds and learn a lot more. I grew up on the East Coast in a small little town called Connecticut. And I was one of the only Asian Americans in my graduating class. So it was really neat to be in kind of an environment where I could meet other people like me.
So I'm surprised with the last name Furukawa, you're Japanese. You didn't know about Kendo before going to Rochester?
Yeah, not really. I might have heard about it once or twice, but I never dreamed to think that you could do it in America.
Ah, okay. So none of your family was into it when they were in Japan, or it was never caught up?
Nope. I was born and raised in America, so.
What would you have done if you didn't discover Kendo? What other hobbies did you have growing up?
Oh, sure. Before college, I was really big into violin and did soccer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So there's some active sports in there. So get your blood kind of pumping, conditioning as well as some kind of art, that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So Michael, how did you get started? We'll talk a bit about before Kendo, and then how did Kendo come into your life?
I always wanted to do Kendo. As soon as I saw it for the first time, I think it was in a movie, one of the Three Ninjas movies from way back in the 90s. I just wanted to do it. I grew up, my mom read me all kinds of fairy tales and stories and stuff about heroes with swords and things like that. And then I learned that Kendo, what is this? This is so cool. This is that's exactly what I imagined in my head. And then you hear that it comes from a, specific place in the world. And so I love to read, and I read a lot about that stuff. And I come from a place in Oklahoma called Creek County, which is historically kind of like a lower income countryside town. And so I spent a lot of time in the library learning about not just Kendo, but other martial arts and things like that. And I always wanted to do Kendo, always, but there was nowhere to learn Kendo in Oklahoma at the time. The nearest major city is Tulsa, which is where our dojo is now. And there was the closest things to Kendo at the time would have probably been the fencing academy here, which I took up when I was later middle school. But aside from that, it's mainly karate and American karate. And I had a lot of good people that meant very, very well and very good teachers when I was growing up, but it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. So we did competitions, and you're talking about competition. I played football, baseball, basketball, all that stuff, kind of the traditional American things, but they weren't really what I was looking for. So Kendo is that's it for me. It's what I wanted most.
Cool. So one of the things, besides the fact that you're wearing a full suit of armor and you're using a bamboo sword, one of the first things when people look at Kendo and go to an actual dojo is they notice the kiaing. So what was your first impressions? Let's go with Michael first and then Shaw. What was your first impression when you stepped into a dojo and realized how loud it could be?
I love loud stuff. I love loud. Shaw's laughing. I love loud music and loud places and loud stuff. So it didn't bother me too much. And coincidentally, I suppose I owe my old karate instructors some gratitude. But they emphasize when we're doing the performing kata, for judges and things, to make a loud kiai. And I won a competition when I was a kid doing kata just because I made the loud kiai. So I kind of expected it. It wasn't really a culture shock to me. There were other culture shocks, but the noise wasn't one for me personally.
Okay, and Shaw?
Yeah, for me, it was pretty kind of the same thing. It was a bit overwhelming at first. our club was, we had about 80 people show up the first day of practice. I remember I didn't even have a shinai. I was swinging with my hands, with bare hands. And, they started yelling at us in Japanese and just pushing us to do certain poses and swinging our arms in a certain way. And it was really a cool experience to see that many people. But just like any other Kendo class, first day, a lot of people. Second day, not so much. Third day, we whittled it down to about, I think, 10 people after the third practice.
So Shaw, you had mentioned that one of the things that kept you around was like the community part of it. And we know that a lot of classes like these, sports, you go and then you finish and then you're done with it. Maybe you go hang out with a couple of people, friends that were playing. But I know it's heavily, I don't know for you guys, but heavily for this type of art, the senseis would come out with you, like you would be hanging out with them. Did you have that experience? And what was that like your first time going out and you realize, hey, this person that's teaching, like standing above everyone is also just
human being.
Yeah, human being. For sure, so our instructor, he was also he was the president of the anime club at the time. So, I mean, he was a really approachable guy. It wasn't like this, really vertical kind of hierarchy feeling. He was very just kind of open with us. And yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with our dojo, right? Like we have so many activities that we do outside of just regular practice. I mean, obviously pre-pandemic, we would go out to, charity runs together, charity walks, do a bunch of demonstrations for cultural festivals, go out for eating, these kind of activities.
Just quickly before we go on to Michael, so Shaw, when you're saying all these different activities, was that something that you would have been doing anyways, or was that something you learned through participating in those Kendo clubs?
I would say a little bit of both. It kind of happened organically. I don't think we actually planned any of it to happen. One member would mention like, hey, let's do this charity event. I'm going to it anyway. Do you guys want to come? And we would all just kind of join in as a group. And, we build a lot of bonds and really like deep friendships through that way.
Cool. Yeah. And Michael, what was your first kind of experience of second dojo or budo keiko?
Second dojo. Where would we be without second dojo? I could remember distinctly being a college student. I started practicing when I was 18, and then just getting destroyed at practice, like past your physical limitations, past your mental limitations. And then you just want to go home and they tell you like, well, you're coming to eat. I'm like, I am? It's like, yes, you're coming to eat. And it's like, we get to be friends. I didn't know we were going to be friends at the end of all this. And it kind of opened my eyes to like what we were there to do, which is kind of bond with each other. And, the more deeply connected you are, the more you can push each other to excel. And that really registered with me. I was more of a loner type person. I was used to being an outsider I'm still used to being an outsider in places where I go. I don't mind not fitting in, but to have a group that sort of surrounds and adopts you in just for the sake of showing up and putting out, that was a whole new thing for me. And we would be here all night talking about the value and the connections that's given me even today and the role that's played in my life.
And now that both of you are senseis, you kind of have that responsibility of when people come out, if they are shy people that you have to bring up some subjects or you have to kind of help them with the conversations. What are some of the things you've learned over time experiencing yourself as just another student, another person sitting there hoping to not get selected to speak up because you don't know what to say? How have you flipped that around? What have you learned from the senseis and senpais that you've had over the years? Michael first.
Okay. The truth is, I think for all of us, in terms of understanding and connecting to learners and deshi, is that we pull a little bit from our sensei, whether we mean to or not. And my sensei had this way of being like the coolest older brother that you could have, like somebody that was ready to rib you a little bit, but somebody who would bring you in and kind of you felt safe around. and hold you up. And like everybody was the same when we were all together. And especially when Abe Sensei was there, everybody was all the same. And so what I try to do with, especially with shyer people, is to be that same thing. I am an older brother. And so I want the people to feel like that they're part of the group and connected to us. And, you know, even if they're a little bit reticent to speak up or to contribute or anything, that they're more than welcome, and that we encourage it. And we're trying to get to know each other. So pulling people out of that shell, I'm happy to say, is something that Shaw and I are pretty good at doing. And the best part about this relationship is that if I can't do it, this guy can. This is straight truth.
I honestly don't know what I do. We just kind of talk to them and see what, you know, if we have any sort of common interests, and then just talk about that, really. I don't really have any plan.
I wouldn't say it's good cop, bad cop. It's not quite to that level.
Good cop, bad cop, maybe.
It's like a high-low approach, and then we just change. So if, you know, some people are,
depending on the person, we'll just switch it up and throw them for a loop.
I think it just depends on the person, you know, which approach they prefer. We are blessed to have a community that supports us as the instructors as well. So all our senpai we're all trying to reach out and kind of build those bonds that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, it's really great too, being a part of our federation. Whenever we go to events, everybody's just kind of like in that same sort of mentality, same sort of groove. You know, when we're going for competitions, I mean, yeah, of course you're competing and you have to be really focused on beating your opponent, but it's really kind of the sense of camaraderie afterwards, right? After the keiko's over or whatever. And I think it's a common sort of feeling you get in most budo, right? After you do the hard practice, you go out together and you have a drink or you have some food together and you talk about things. It doesn't even have to necessarily be budo related.
Yeah, and you're mentioning this broader community, like the senpais and senseis, and then when you go to bigger tournaments, maybe you could you each talk about your first experience going to a national event or something, that, because you started Kendo both in a relatively small town, small city. Like, what was that like, having that first exposure to world, like all United States was doing this? Shaw, why didn't you start this one?
Yeah, it was really fun. Very first tournament I went to, I remember losing in just like 3 seconds flat. Just absolutely got destroyed, just demolished. I felt a little bit better afterwards because I knew the guy that beat me right off the bat was the guy that won the tournament. So I'm just gonna give myself that little feeling. But yeah, no, it was really great being part of a bigger community afterwards. You know, I learned a lot about myself as well through that practice, and going to those kind of big events. One thing that touched me kind of in a really kind of emotional way was, I remember that I had my father with me and we were going over to this tournament. I don't remember what we were doing, but he was standing up and I was sitting down, and the head shimpan of the whole tournament walked up to my father with a chair and just placed it down in front of him to have him, to show him like, hey, you can sit right here. And I just felt utterly defeated. Just right there, like, oh, why didn't I do this? Right? He didn't have to say anything, but it was just those kind of small motions and small like kind of gestures of compassion, right? That you learn from in so many ways. That he had a feeling of, what was it called? Kigurai, that kind of like confidence without having to be boastful. And that person actually ended up being Kato Sensei, who's a Kyoshi, or sorry, not Kyoshi. He's a Hachidan.
Oh yeah, I can imagine having even now, like you could see something about him. Yeah, funny because I do Iaido, and every year we go down to the New York area and we participate in a tournament there, and Kato Sensei is the head there, so it's always great having him teach. So just before we move on to Michael, what do you remember from that specific tournament? Where was it? What was being? How many people were there? Just generally promote that event.
Sure.
A little bit. Yeah.
Well, the first one I went to was in what was it? It was at the not Yale University. The other one. Brain fart. I'm having a brain fart on this one. Sorry. It was what's that university? Shoot, I can't remember I can't remember it. The life of me now. But it wasn't a very large. It was a what was that famous military university over there in New York?
Military West Point.
West Point. It was West Point. Thank you. Yeah, it was a West Point university or West
You
Point.
needed a Canadian to tell you what the American university
I know. I had a brain fart about that. It was at West Point, and I remember. Oh, one other thing I remember about that tournament, we had the Army team come in, and they were just all like super jacked and just in great shape, and just walking in single file and really organized, and just feeling overwhelmed by that. It wasn't a huge tournament either. It was a pretty small one, maybe like 40, 50 people participating in it.
Wait, so that's the first time I've heard that West Point has a Kendo team?
Yeah, like they did it back then.
Wow. So how did they do?
I remember them doing really well. I don't remember if they took first place, but they were up in the top 4.
Oh, wow. Cool. Okay, Michael, what was your first big event?
Tournament, but I mean, that was definitely an experience. It was 2006, and my sensei, Koki Abe, told us, like, well, there's a tournament, and I want you guys to go. And our dojo was like 4 or 5 people at the time. And I was like, okay, I did karate tournaments when I was a kid, so I don't mind. Where is it? And he was like, Detroit. I was like, what? It's like, well, that's like 16 hours away. So how are we going to get there? I don't know if I can afford a plane ticket. And he's like, we're driving and we're leaving on Wednesday. I was like, Wednesday? The tournament's not till Friday. It's like, we're going to drive up at like 5 p.m. So like, I was like, this is just bonkers to me. Like, all the family vacation road trips I've ever had, leave early in the morning, get there, whatever. And so we drove up straight, left at like 5 p.m. from Shawnee, Oklahoma. And he drove all through the night, and he stopped at every single McDonald's that he saw on the way. And he ordered the same thing. He ordered a Big Mac and fries and an iced tea. And because of his accent, he kept getting high C's from the people, which is, like the fruit drink. And so we get there, and like along the way, like I'm in and out of sleep. And he was telling me about his training back home that he did in order to get ready for tournaments like in middle school and high school. And as he's telling, this is like horrific stuff. It's just like practice all day and then just pass out in your kikogi hakama bogu, whatever, on a mattress, wake up and just get back to it without ever changing clothes. And I'm dreaming this as he's telling me, like it's intruding upon my dreams. So I was terrified the whole trip. And so when we get up there, we did the shinza, the testing the day before the tournament. And I was really excited to get to do the shinza. I was testing for EQ, and you can do that back then. And I didn't make it. I failed by 1 vote. And so like for the tournament, I went in kind of down the dumps. And I was like, I always lose the matches in the dojo. Like my senpai are always beating me. I don't feel like I know what I'm doing. I don't really know why I came here. And then I did my first match, and I was able to win. And so it was like, oh, that's it. You just have to do what we do back home. Just do it here. Okay, so that's fine. But the first thing that hit me, I wasn't able to win the second match. I lost in the overtime by 1 point, which was crazy. And the thing that struck me immediately was how good everyone else was. Like you walk into the room, if you want to talk about being overwhelmed, that's overwhelming to walk into a Iaido or anything like that where there's a Kendo tournament, because they are really serious about everything they're doing. They're not going to hold back. And it's like watching a fight. It's not like watching a sporty, like a game. It's like watching a fight, being there. And they were amazing. And it was like everyone was better than me. So the fact that I won, I can remember I found Abe Sensei because he was going to compete too later that day, which having sensei that compete in tournaments, I mean, that's incredible. My teachers didn't do that when I was younger. They feel like they would lose something, if they lost. But Abe Sensei is going to compete. And so I found him and I was like, I won my first match. And he just like held out his hand and he goes like, congratulations. I was like, you didn't think I could do it, did you? And just like, it's just impressive that you won. And I was just like, man. So that was the first experience I had. It was exhausting just being there. I lost the second match was in the morning, and they still have like the Shodan, up to Sandan, Shodan Nidan, Sandan Yondan divisions and the Kodansha. And just watching this stuff was just overwhelming. That was overwhelming because you're seeing the people apply this stuff in competition, and it was crazy. It was crazy. Abe Sensei did really well. He fought a guy that was using Mito, the two-sword style, which you hear about that. But that was the first tournament I went and I saw it. And Abe Sensei it was awesome what he did. He was able to win, and it was great. And seeing all that stuff is like, this is incredible. I want to try to be one of these people. Seeing it like that, like that's it. It's not what I saw in the movies. It's not what you see in video games or anything else. But that's incredible, and I want to be able to do that. And then I went home and I slept for like 2 or 3 days. Not that long, but it was an exhausting trip for sure. That was the first tournament I went to.
Yeah, I'll bet. Like even just having to do that drive, and did you do like the same straight trip back? Like
no, God no. And I'm so glad. Like after the tournament was over, we went to another sensei's house and did the nabe. that was just as bad as the tournament because we started eating at like 6 and then we just kept eating. And by the end of the night, like I couldn't chew anymore. Like this is sore. And so we slept, and I'd saved up enough money, like a little bit before I got some help from my parents to get a plane ticket back so I could be in class at the college on Monday. And I was just thinking like, oh my goodness, thank you, Mom and Dad, for giving me that money. I don't want to drive back with this crazy man, like all the way back down to Oklahoma after all this. I don't know what other nightmares she's going to give me on the way home. But yeah, I made it to the airport, flew back, and crashed, absolutely crashed. And then, of course, I went back to the dojo thinking like, man, I won my first match. I'm a big man now. And that absolutely wasn't the case. It was just boom, boom, boom. And that part didn't change. And I realized that's what made me strong. Like that's what made me able to win the match that I was able to win, just that process. So like the hard work yielded a very tangible reward for me. Yeah,
and that's such a great experience to have, like when you're when you're still pretty young and you're just trying to experience the world still at school. What was it like when you guys graduated then? Because a lot of people, they either start before school and then school gets in the way and then some like other priorities come up. But if you start while you're at university and then you come out, there's also that pressure of, okay, now I'm being an adult now. How did that affect either of you? Maybe Shaw, you could start first because you also had to travel around. Like you didn't stay in Rochester.
Yeah, sure. So upon graduating, I started work here in Oklahoma for a company called Century Martial Arts. It's one of the largest martial arts suppliers in the world. If you ever watch that show right now that's going on, Cobra Kai, our stuff is plastered all over it. But that's our company. But yeah, it was tricky because moving out to Oklahoma, you don't really have a whole lot of access to Kendo, right? I was lucky in that there is one dojo here in Oklahoma City that was doing it, but it was, there wasn't a very large population for it. So there was maybe like 2 or 3 people, and I didn't even have a rank at the time. I was a Mukyusha. So we would have to go travel as much as we could to separate places to gather in as much information as you can and try to get as much training as you can. And every kind of bit of advice that you get is really kind of critical. But yeah, balancing the time between starting out working and then doing Kendo and then trying to start building up like a bigger kind of community for the group. It is a hard balancing act. And I think for me, I had the luxury of being able to kind of prioritize what I wanted to work on because I did have some free time to do it.
So was that when you two met?
Yeah, that's actually right around the time we met.
Okay, why don't you give your first impressions of Michael, and then we'll go over to Michael. What were your first impressions, and how did that post university days, college days, what was that like?
Oh, it was kind of funny actually. There was kind of a mix up as to what information that Michael got about me. So he thought I was like from like a hotshot university student kendoka that just moved to Oklahoma at the time. So that was the pretense as to how we first met. And I remember Michael was very, very kind, and he was trying to accommodate for me and speaking directly to me in Japanese. And then I just replied, "Oh, your Japanese is really good." So that then it was like, "Oh, thank goodness, we can just be ourselves now." And I remember, but like I remember that again, through these experiences I've had through Kendo, all the people I've met consistently have been really open-minded and like accommodating and trying to like be as friendly as they could be, and that was again a reflection, even moving all the way out from the East Coast to Oklahoma, which isn't the middle of nowhere really.
Okay, and Michael, what was your post school days like? How did you first start trying to balance what you had to do, and then with Kendo, and then like when Shaw came in, how did you guys gradually like start taking more leadership responsibility?
I remember that story differently, Shaw. You're doing me too many favors. All right, that's actually a neat story. I started Kendo in college, and then when after I finished sophomore year, my sensei went back to Japan. And so the dojo that we built, like he started practicing at the dojo that Shaw is mentioning, which is called Tenshinkan in Oklahoma City. And then he opened a second practice place closer to the university where he was studying, which is like 40 minutes away from Oklahoma City. So I was going to that dojo. And when he left, he left kind of around February. So it just died. Like the practices died. I was the highest ranking person there, like Gokyu, having just failed the EQ test. And, I was like, what are we going to do? And when he left, like, I was like, I don't want to stop practicing. So what should I do? And he said, make a club. And so I was transferring from the university I was at to a university in my hometown, which is the University of Tulsa here. And so I got a few friends together who were interested, and we made the first Tulsa Kendo club. And we're all college students and stuff. And then once I graduated, we just moved the club from the college to a YMCA at the sort of the advice of one of our members. And so that's what we did, is I just carried the Kendo with me. And then everybody sort of came to that. So we're practicing in Tulsa, and there's a separate dojo in Oklahoma City. And like the dojo in Oklahoma City was like the home base. I was like, they're in charge of everything. And we had like 2 or 3 people that would practice with us, like up there, me and one other guy. And so we would just drive down to Oklahoma City, which is about, it's about an hour and a half to get down there, and just drive back, twice a month, 3 times a month, something like that, whenever we could. And I just didn't want to let it go. I didn't care, like, oh, I've got other responsibilities. I got to find a job. What am I going to do? Like, Kendo was too much to let go of. It had become too important to just surrender and, give an excuse as to why I couldn't do it. So I just tried. And I was like, well, I majored in something I didn't wind up doing, which is, all too common, sadly. But I was substitute teaching at a school district here in town. And I just fell in love with talking to kids. And I realized, like, this is really similar to kind of what we're doing in the dojo, because you're trying to communicate with people. And even when you're fighting, there's a communication that's happening. It's a different kind of communication, but there is a communication. You have to read the person. And so I was like, well, I could be a teacher. I learned kind of how to teach. My mom's a great teacher. I learned from my sensei, and I can do that. I'll just do that. I'll do that. And so I did. And, a few years bounced by, and then I'm meeting this character here at the bottom of the screen. I thought absolutely that he was like from Japan and that he was going to be teaching classes. I was really nervous, and he was pretty good, even though like he hit completely with his right hand all the time, which I did too. And I still do. And so I remember being immediately relaxed when I walked up, and I could recognize the kanji on his nafuda and saying Furukawa, which is like old river, And so it was like, oh, it's old river. And he was like, yeah, I'm English is fine. And I was just like, oh, thank God. Oh, goodness gracious. So thank you for coming, and blah, 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 blah. And that it kind of took off from there. And eventually, like I just kept going to Oklahoma City. And eventually he started coming up to Tulsa to visit. And so like our practice here got infused with people and interest. And eventually he moved in like 2013. And that just broke all of our hearts. No two ways about it. He moved to Baltimore. And that same year, I started getting very, 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 very sick, like almost dead several times over the course of 2 years, sick. And then I got a call from this guy down here that was like, hey, I'm going to come to visit Tulsa. And I was like in the midst of my recovery. And I was like, okay, great to see you, bro. And so he came back in and he was like, oh, I just want to go out to dinner and we'll shoot the business and talk about the good old days. And I didn't know he was coming for a job interview. So he flew back to Tulsa, interviewed for a job, and then took the job here. And then while I was recovering, like, he's running the dojo. Like, where does that happen? That's Kendo. Like, that's budo. Where else is that kind of thing going to happen? And so from there, that's how we built everything. I guess that it's not just trying to find, to sum up what I just said, all that nonsense. It's not trying to find a balance for Kendo. For me, it was letting Kendo make the balance in my life. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think that story resonates with a lot of people. And Shaw had shared the article that you had written and that was posted on Kendo World. So I want you to get into that story. But before that, Shaw, could you talk about that last bit of, like, what were you thinking in terms of moving back to Tulsa? Like, how did you get that job offer? And then what was those first couple of months or years while Michael was still recovering? What was that like?
Sneaky.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, it was a sneaky move, I guess. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Taking up, kind of picking up the mantle and helping out Michael for sure. It was quite a daunting task too. It was a bit scary at first. I didn't know what I was doing. I still don't really know what I'm doing, quite honestly. But I think being there for somebody and being there for each other is one of the most important things we can do. I think having sort of like a plan to help out when you can, if you're able to, is really an important message that I've learned throughout practicing Kendo, and just trying to lift each other up, so to speak.
Yeah. So the next question I'm going to ask, and because we already know what Michael's answer is going to be, Shaw, you can think of it while Michael's talking, is do you have a defining event that can split up your Kendo practice into a before and an after? So you can think about that question. I'm pretty sure Michael's answer is going to be that. So why don't you tell us about what happened?
The answer is yes. Yes. In 2013, I started getting crazy sick, and the doctors had told me I had what's called ulcerative proctitis, which is like it's an extension of ulcerative colitis, which is like a bowel disorder. And so the lining of my intestines was like inflamed, and I was bleeding internally. And it's a manageable condition as long as you take steroids and take the right precautions. And I just didn't do it. And I was in a lot of high stress situations at work and at home, and it snuck up on me. And then, like, we did a seminar here in Tulsa in 2013. I think I weighed at the time, I was pretty chunky at the time. I was like 235, something like that. And that was in October, and by December, I was down to about 190. So the weight just shot out from under me. And the next year, I spent the first time in the hospital was 11 days, and they gave me an immunosuppressant, and it was meant to shut down, because your immune system is attacking itself. It's an autoimmune disorder. And so they meant to shut down my immune system. I was in the hospital 11 days. It was terrible. It was terrible. The hospital is like, the people that work there are like angels, but the place is like health jail. Like, there's very little that you can do once you're admitted and you're there. Your day is dictated by other people, and that was a new experience for me. And then what happened, I can remember going home once I was dismissed. I thought everything was fine, and it wasn't, because I didn't get better. I was hallucinating. Had fever, crazy fever all the time. And I can remember sitting down on my couch in my front room and feeling like someone had like kicked me in my stomach. And I was like, what happened? And then I was just like, your brain does really weird things when you're that fractured. And so I was like, don't do anything. Just sit here. It'll be fine. Go to sleep. Wake up. It'll be fine. And so I can remember my wife came home. She's like, something is really wrong. And I was like, I think we need to go back. And so took the ambulance in. And then I remember being in the hospital for a few days before they decided what to do. And then this guy was a surgeon. I only met him like one or two times. Came in and he like had his hands folded like this across his chest. I was like, oh, what the hell is this? And he's like, so there's air in your the cavity, abdominal cavity, and I'm going to open you up. And I was like, okay, is that going to fix everything? And he's like, it will fix everything. It will, but not immediately. I want to see what's wrong. And that doesn't register with you as soon as you hear it. But that later that day, they did the operation and they did a full colectomy because like the whole of the large intestine was like, they said it was like wet newspaper and it had torn and dyed in 3 places. So all the stuff that goes through your guts was pouring into my abdominal cavity, and it had been for a week or two or even longer. And the problem was with all that, they didn't expect to do the full colectomy. They had to on the spot because I was dying. And I didn't know this, but my family is Scottish. I've got red hair in certain places, and apparently redheads have a really weird reaction to anesthesia sometimes because it doesn't do quite as much. And so after the procedure was over and they woke me up, I felt everything. And it took like 3 or 4 of the people to hold me down. And I can remember screaming. I remember the surgeons, like he was holding on to me and he was saying in my ear, it was necrotic. We had to take it out. It was necrotic. And so I don't have any idea what that means. It was agony beyond words. And I can remember passing out. And when I woke up, I can remember begging the nurse in the room, please hold my hand, just hold my hand. Get my mom, get somebody, just somebody hold my hand. And they were like, Mr. Lindsay, you're fine. You're going to get better here in a second. You'll be up to your room. And I thought that was the end. I was just begging for someone to hold my hand. And so I went up to the hospital. Everything was terrible. I was in PO for, I think, 5 or 6 days, maybe longer. Had an NG tube down the throat. I was anemic. I can't remember how many units of plasma and blood they gave me. My mom would tell you one number that's like astronomical, but I mean, they gave a lot. And the nurses told her that I was going to die in like 18 hours. If the potassium in my blood didn't increase, I was going to have a stroke. And so I can remember the moment where all this horror story kind of stops in its tracks. The surgeon's associate practitioner came in. And I was just woke up. You don't ever sleep too long in the hospital. And I woke up at like 6 o'clock in the morning. He came in, he was checking stuff. And he was like, are you feeling better today? And I was like, no, this thing in my nose hurts because it's the NG tube. And he was like, well, let me get that out for you. And he put his hand on my nose, twisted, and then yanked this tube out. And he was like, don't you feel better? And I was like shocked, I was stunned. And I was just like, I guess. And he's like, well, we're going to get you up and walking around later. And then he left. And I just cried. I cried in the bed and I wanted to die. And I solemnly swear that my phone rang at that moment. I'm not exaggerating, that my phone rang, and it was Abe Sensei calling me from Japan. And he told me it was good to hear my voice, which is crazy. And he told me 3 things. He said not to worry about money because the dojo there had raised a large sum of money to help me with like hospital bills and food. I've been to this dojo once in my life. He told me that he would come and see me soon and that they'd already bought tickets like for this seminar that they were going to do in the fall. And then he told me that the head instructor, Imanami Sensei of the dojo, had told me to fight. And I told him, I don't know if I'm going to be able to practice again. I don't, because your body is broken. It's broken inside, outside, and it's broken up here. And he said, don't worry about it and just do what you can. And I'll see you in October, is what he said. And then I hung up. And from that day forward, it was more about like, how do I get out of here? How do I get out of the hospital? I asked the surgeon the next day. I showed him a clip of Kendo on my phone. And I was like, am I going to be able to do this again once I'm out of here? Because you don't know what this is going to be like. And he was like, well, it seems that way. It looks like you may have incurred some cranial damage, possibly, if you pick this up and go with it. But I don't see any reason you can't. He's a surgeon, yeah. And so, eventually I got out. I had to go back. I got pneumonia twice. I I herniated the surgery wound coming back into practice too soon, went up and down about 120 pounds here and there. The surgery didn't take that they did to try to restore the large intestine was gone. So they had to take the next thing they did out again. I found out that it wasn't ulcerative colitis or proctitis. It was Crohn's disease the whole time. So I was misdiagnosed and it was pretty rough. But in between all that happening, I was able to test and get the Yondan, like in front of like the Team USA members who did so well in 2006, you know, like Onitsuka sensei and Brandon Harada sensei. And like, I got the Yondan taking the test and that meant a lot. And so I was like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. I don't care how sick I get. I can do this. I know I can. I don't care how long it takes. I can do this. And so in 2016, 17, I started getting back into it. The ability was not there. Skill had not returned whatsoever. But past that point, I started trying to push myself, I don't know, to get further, to get back where I was. And along the way, it's just that you feel so much support from the community that it's not a burden. It's not a burden to lose. It's not a burden to have to try harder. It's not a burden to feel like you're upset for one day because everyone is holding you up. Like the bond that we have is holding us up and holding me up and pushing me forward. And it changed everything. It changed how I looked at the martial art. It let me know what's real about what we do and why we do it. And the you know, at the end of the day, we're using a sword, but this is the, you know, the principles and applications of the sword. And one of those principles is supposed to be how we use our spirit. And so for me, that was there with me in the hospital. And when I couldn't use my spirit myself, you know, my family around me, you know, my Kendo family, they were there to pick it up and use it for me. So that was what changed things for me.
Yeah, that's amazing story and experience. Did you ever have a chance to talk to Abe Sensei, Iwanami Sensei about that phone call, like afterwards?
I don't know. I see him because of the pandemic. One of the highlights has been that we do Zoom Suburi every week. So that for the first time since I was in college, I got to practice with my sensei every week. So I think my mom cornered him one time and was like, you know, Michael attributes a lot of stuff to you. And he was like, I didn't do anything. Like, I think that he knows though, like, I don't know. I maybe I should tell him, but they were there through all of it. I mean, they came back in the middle of the recovery in 2014 to do the seminar. They came back in 2016 to do another seminar. They saw, you know, Iwanami Sensei one time, we were taking him around shopping after the seminar was over. They always want to go to Walmart, you know, Walmart's America. And so I was walking around and I was on hydrocodone. I could just barely move. I'd been up all day and I was like hunched over at the abdomen. And then he just told me like, put your hand on my shoulder and we're going to go sit in the car. And so like my sensei let me, like this Nanadan Kyoshi, you know, Kanagawa Highway Patrol is like, lets me put my hand on his shoulder to like get out to the car and then he just sits in the car with me. He doesn't speak English. I don't speak that. My Japanese isn't that good. So we just sat together in the car. So, I mean, I'll tell them about it, but I have a feeling they already know, you know? So it's that kind of stuff when you're in darkness, those kinds of lights push you through. And it felt like everything that I did had a purpose and a meaning after that point. So it was just the proof.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that and for writing that article. There are a few more points in that. I encourage people that are listening to this podcast to also go check it out. I'll link it in the notes here. But there's a really cool section there that you talk about ki and what that means. So please read that. Shaw, we all have our different experiences. Some ideally not as traumatic as what Michael had gone through, but do you have a sort of defining moment in your life that you can split into a before and after? And what was Kendo like in the before and then after?
I think the first defining moment for sure is after you get on Bogu, when you first put it on. You know, you have an idea of what you're doing. You have an idea of what it's going to feel like. But then once you put that men on, you can't see anything. It's hot. It's smelly. Everybody's going to be pushing you around. It doesn't quite fit right because you're just borrowing it from a club. I think that's a pretty common experience that a lot of people have. The second one would be probably after Shodan. Now that you reach that one point, right, there's another kind of plateau where you have to kind of push through yourself. But aside from those kind of, normal steps that you see in a lot of Kendoka, I think the most important defining moment for me is meeting this person right here, Michael Lindsay. I think he has been the largest influence on my Kendo in my entire Kendo career, for sure.
All right. Thank you for sharing those things. So the next question I have is related to people that have influenced your practice. So there's this framework that I heard from another podcast that it's called the plus, minus, and equal. So everyone to improve, they need someone that's above them, that's better than them, like a senpai or a sensei that pulls them up and shows them something that they can strive for. They need an equal, so that's like a peer that you're constantly fighting with and against, that pushes, like motivates you to be better. And then there's a minus or a junior, someone that is less skilled, less experienced, that in trying to teach them, it helps you understand your own practice a little more. So do either one of you want to name one of those three, a plus, minus, or equal, and talk a bit about that relationship that you've developed?
I think we're going to have a lot of the same ones, honestly. For the ones that are above us, obviously are Chu Sensei, Yonami Sensei, and Abe Sensei. Like without them and their support, like we couldn't grow as much as we have. In terms of like the same rank, Michael and I are both Yondan, so we definitely play off of each other. I would say he's higher than me though, so that's for sure. And then for our students would definitely be our support that help raise us and get us better.
For me, and it's taller, not higher, Shaw, taller. Okay. For me, people above me, Koki Abe, I don't know what I would do. I don't know what I would do without him. That's the big part of my life, is that guy. Yunami Sensei, Yunami Yoshio Sensei, same. I don't know. There are no better examples. I'd also put Michio Kachitai Sensei up there, Russell Ichimura Sensei, Masayuki Mizuchi Sensei. All those people are like higher. And Takuro Yamaoka Sensei, higher. People that we're looking towards to improve. People that are on level. And in addition to Shaw here, my brothers, Luis Angeli and Josh Kahn, we're all part of the same family. We're all students of Abe Sensei. We all live in different places, and like our bonds are what get us through hard stuff. My brother, Josh Kahn's going through a hard time right now with recovery. And it's a pleasure to relate to him the way he related to me. I'm looking forward to doing all the stuff he did for me, for him, getting back to it. And then the people underneath, the students here, absolutely. I would include something though. In my journey, I would say my wife as well, because she's been through everything I was going through, and she's been in so many lessons watching Abe Sensei teach, watching Iwanami Sensei teach, that she's good at giving feedback, even though she doesn't do Kendo. She knows what good Kendo looks like. And then my mother and father always trying to push me forward, and to, they don't understand Kendo the same way, but they know how much it means to me. And so that support from underneath is like a foundation. And I would say those things for sure. Yeah.
So normally when I'm just interviewing one person, I can have them answer these next two questions. But in this case, maybe you guys could try answering the question for the other person. So it's a two-parter. The first one is, what seems to come easy for you that others find difficult? And then vice versa, what seems to be difficult for you that you look around and it seems easy for others? So let's start with what comes easy, and then, but for other people.
One thing I think that, Michael, it comes really easy to Michael is leadership and teaching on the fly. Being able to work in like tough situations and knowing the right things to do during those right situations. But yeah, I think that's one definite strength that he has, for sure.
And for Shaw, oh my God, structural support like structural support, there is nothing that gets by him. There is nothing that gets by him in terms of logistically. Together, in terms of organization, I don't think there's anything we can't do as long as he's there. He's so good at empathizing with people on, you know, the end of like the people who are actually going to be doing plans and things like that, or people who are affected by the plans. Leadership in the same way, the ability to extend like a helping hand, always first with a plan, right? Helping with a plan. I think Shaw does that better than really anybody I practice with.
Cool. And just to maintain harmony, you can answer this question for yourself. What do you struggle with that other Kendoka seem to comes easy to them?
Oh, for me, I struggle with a lot. Where do I begin? Holy cow. So definitely for me, you know, it's working in really high pressure kind of tournaments. For some reason, I always struggle with that. And I know I'm still working through it. That's my biggest hurdle. In any case, like it could be Kendo or Iaido, right? Anytime you have a whole lot of pressure, it's always a tough situation to be in. But that's kind of the reason why you have to go to those tournaments and you have to go to those examinations and what have you, right? You have to get that level of pressure testing and that feeling of stress and that sense of urgency, so that you can learn how to be calm in those situations, even if it does, right, arise.
Me, I don't know if you know this or not, but I am not Japanese and I am not Korean, right? So I have had so many just moron gaffes in terms of like culture and etiquette and communication and things like that, where I think I can communicate with this person well, you know, and then completely screw it up. Just completely screw it up and just being dumb. I think that's something that I do pretty regularly that it seems like other people are a lot better at avoiding, and just being a little bit more, I don't know, just less intelligent, I guess, maybe making more like clod-headed decisions and things like that. And then everything. I mean, there's not really a past just being stupid. I don't think there's anything that I do in particular that's better than anybody else. We're all working so hard on this stuff just to improve like that much. I think that, you know, I think that everything I do, really, everything I do in particular is lower than a lot of the people that I want to be as good as. So where I see myself versus where I am, it isn't just one thing, it's many things. But I think that's kind of part of the pursuit as well. I'm going to console myself and say it's part of the pursuit. Yeah.
So what I'm getting from both of you is you guys are really, 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 really good at being humble.
It's accurate. it's accurate. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to move on to just the rapid fire questions at the end. So a couple of quick, hopefully easier questions to answer. So the first one, let's start with Shaw. Do you have a favorite quote or proverb?
Yeah, you know, there's a ton of like budo specific quotes you could cite, but one of my favorite is it's actually not budo related, and that's not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. And I think that's something that it could be used in so many things, aspects of life.
Yeah, very nice. I like that one too. And Michael?
Kenchisai, which means put your life into your sword.
Cool. I haven't heard that one yet. That's is that normally used in somewhere? Where did you find that?
It's on the tenugui from Shikukai. It's the club tenugui that we use, and I have every confidence that that's something Iwanami Sensei has said in the past. That's his mentality. But put everything in, all of it. Don't hold anything back. Kenchisai.
Cool. Next question. Now that you both are Yondan and relative, that's a more intermediate senior rank. Is there something that you've changed your mind in that about Kendo that you didn't know before, or you thought was true but is now false, or you thought was not really right but now you believe is true? What have you changed your mind on in recent years?
Man, there's so much. One thing that's a big one. So our dojo is in a very small, like it's a very small part of the U.S. I think the strategy in which we advertise ourselves, my mentality has changed quite drastically. Like, the idea of how I was doing advertising and how we got our group to grow in the East Coast when I started, that technique, those strategies that we were using then, they're no longer relevant. You can't do that. You can't just post up flyers on a electric pole or your university campus and expect people to show up and then set up like maybe a website. That's something that's hugely different now, right? I think that as a dojo, you have to have kind of a strong message where you want to market yourself as, whatever that message is. And it doesn't necessarily need to be something that's like unique or different, because chances are whatever you're trying to communicate isn't all that unique or different from anybody else, right? But you have to be able to reach that audience. So like what would be the difference between our dojo and any other dojo, right? Why would they want to come to our dojo versus another dojo? And I think those kind of strategies, which are always evolving, that's something that's definitely changed for me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to your dojo's TikTok dance battle.
The TikTok dance battle, right?
It's in the works. For me, the purpose of Kendo, that a lot of people get hung up around the notion that Kendo is a sport and that it's just for competition, which it's not. That's listed in the purpose. Or they look at it as like a watered down version of an old martial art or something, ignoring all of the effort, labor, money, and support that goes into it from multiple national governments and things like that. It's not a way for people to learn how to pretend to be samurai. It's a way to learn the best things about being samurai and apply them to you. So it's like the ultimate gift that culture can give in terms of like relevance to us. And, what is that? Is that, well, I wanted to learn how to cut somebody's arm off with a sword. That's what I wanted to learn how to do. It's like, okay, on a scale of what I just said and learning to hurt people, I think learning to hurt people is down here. I think this is more relevant, and I think it's harder to do. I think it's harder to fix ourselves than it is to harm other people. And Kendo has taught me that. And when I first got into it, I just wanted to learn how to use a sword. And I guess thinking of it that way, I still do, and I still am, but the sword is just a lot more powerful than a piece of metal.
Yeah, wow. Shaw, I don't know about you, but like being an Asian myself, I'm always constantly embarrassed by like these white guys that understand Buddhist way more than the rest of us.
I don't know what to say. It's the opposite. It's opposite for me. I always feel like that I'm about to fall on my face. I'm from Oklahoma, to make everything worse. Like that's I've already started from a pretty low log I'm standing on. So I'm happy that whatever I've said, if I've said anything that's mattered, I'm happy it's mattered. I'm happy to be a part of it.
Okay, so last just fun question before we wrap up. If we were to log into your YouTube accounts, what would YouTube recommend videos to you based on what you've watched in the past?
Oh man, a lot of cat videos, and I've been watching this one channel. Actually, Michael recommended it to me, called Tasting History with Max Miller. That's a really good one. And of course, Kendo stuff.
Yeah, Kendo stuff. I've been mainlining, like I've probably watched in the last 2 days around 10 hours of Gordon Ramsay's kitchen nightmares, like a lot of kitchen nightmares. And like you start looking for philosophy in the way that he does things when you watch that much of it. So I think I'm at the end of the ride with it. So don't let the last 2-3 days indicate that I have any aspirations of being either Gordon Ramsay or a chef. Neither of those things are true. Being in quarantine and working from home, you explore things just because they're there and you didn't know about them before. I love watching Kendo stuff, watching budo stuff. And Sean and I do this too all the time. We are big fans of other martial arts. We love, watching positive explorations and explanations of other martial arts, especially, using weapons and things like that. And then I have a PlayStation 5 and I am not ashamed of that. So probably video games and things like that. That's about it. I don't know, like if I'm watching cat videos, it's because my wife has been watching YouTube when I'm not there. But we have cats, so I don't need videos to watch them, if that makes sense.
I'm sure your students are going to enjoy when you get back into the dojo dropping F-bombs all the time like Gordon Ramsay. Maybe. It hasn't worked in the past, but maybe we turn the new leaf on that one. I'll give it a try. You just have to do it with a British accent.
I have trouble speaking in like my normal accent. I can talk like one of them, then I'll put in with you on that. But I don't know. I mean, maybe the yelling, maybe it's the pressure he puts on people. It feels like sensei pressure. Maybe that's it. Maybe I just want to be back in the dojo. Yeah,
all of us. Anyways, thank you so much for sharing your stories and being so open with your experiences so far. Do you have anything in closing that you want to share with the audience just before we wrap up? I guess we'll just go in the same order. Shaw and then Michael, just something in closing.
Anybody who's starting out Kendo right now, right, and going through all of that, it does get easier. It gets a little easier, but you have to do it every day. That's the catch. You got to do it. So, but it will get easier.
Yeah. With Kendo, you will get out what you put in, but you need someone along the way to help you understand how to apply yourself. That's the most important thing. It is ultimately an individual journey, but without those helping hands, those people pushing you forward, it's a daunting one. So that's what I would say is put as much as you can into what you do, put your life into your sword, and make sure that you're doing it with people who feel the same way.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much for sharing this. I did have a question. Shaw, you do Iaido. Michael, do you do Iaido?
I do, but he's a lot better at it than me.
Have you guys been to the Nationals? Have I not seen you there before, or you just not been?
No, I've never gone. The Iaido I do, it's only Koryu. It's not Seitei.
Okay.
So I actually have no knowledge of Seitei Iaido at all. But the fun thing is like the silver lining in all of this is that due to the quarantine, there are like a bunch of online kind of like seminars you can go to and like classes that I've been attending and stuff, and it's been really interesting to see it. But yeah, I have zero experience with Seitei, which is kind of funny.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just recently started Kendo because I noticed how I needed it for my Iai.
Yeah, it's like two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, and I'm trying to get my daughter into it, so hopefully she sticks it out.
Yeah. Oh.
It's easier for kids. It really is. It's easier for kids.
They pick it up so much faster than us.
It does. Yeah. I'm like so annoyed. I'm first annoyed that she's not picking it up, and then annoyed that the next day she's like doing it perfectly.
Yeah.
Children, and they don't get tired either. That's a thing. Also with adults, is like there's a very clear I worked all day and this is supposed to be fun line, and kids don't have that. So
yeah,
jealous.
They also don't have to try to use their too much muscle to prove anything. They just swing it.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Thank you guys so much. And I'll talk to you later. Shaw, thank you so much for reaching out to me. There's very few people that actually take the time to do that, so I really appreciate that. and for
No
your
problem.
contributions. Yeah.
Thank you for the
Thank
opportunity.
you for doing what you do.
All right. Have a good night, guys.
Take care. Nice meeting you.